Come, spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again, or at least we were. I'm Ryan Howard, King of the Boneheads. God help you if this is your first time watching the show, because this is the last one we're doing. For the foreseeable future, this is going to be the last Rollin Bones. This has been a difficult decision for me. For those of you who don't know the full history of me and role-playing games and Rollin Bones, let me kind of paint a picture for you. Back in 2019, I had been playing D&D for about 4.5 years, and it was my obsession. I was purely within the 5e camp. That's all that I played. That's all that I knew. And that's what I really enjoyed was playing D&D 5e. I'd played a 3-year campaign, and that was actually I played 2 campaigns that both lasted for 3 years that happened kind of simultaneously. One was a prequel to the other. And that's how I learned to play D&D was 2 5e campaigns that happened simultaneously, one that I was playing in and one that I was running. And I had just gotten married and moved to Nashville. I had been the co-host of a podcast called Digital Men. And for those of you who have never heard that, probably most of you out there, because like I said, it's been 5, almost 6 years since the last episode of Digital Men. That was a podcast that I did with another guy where we talked exclusively about Rush. And then as we ran out of Rush material to cover, we started talking about just rock music in general. And so I had this podcasting bug within me, and I was planning fully to continue on, doing Digital Men. That didn't end up happening. My co-host of that show decided to call it quits, and I had to call it quits at the same time. So, that show just didn't happen anymore. And so I had Rollin Bones. It was only a podcast for about the first 1.5 years of its existence. And I wanted that show to be an interview show where I learned more about D&D, where I kind of taught myself and had others teach me to be a better game master and a better player. And through doing this show, I have gotten the chance to meet some amazing people. I have studied under some of the great masters of this medium. And I have learned a lot, both about role-playing games and about myself. I'm going to try not to get emotional. I probably will not, but if I do, just, I've been drinking, so. But, I've changed a lot over 5 years, and, what a 5 years to experience. A lot of I don't have to say what was going on in the world over the past 5 years that would kind of put someone through changes like I went through. But, more more pertinent to this conversation here tonight is I changed a lot in my outlook on gaming. I went from being a, 5e only, 5e is the best gamer, to kind of firmly an OSR gamer. I've talked about this on the channel before. I was an OSR gamer for the longest time. And then I started to interact with people like Victor Gorchev and the Basic Expert and Crossface. And through them, I got introduced to the bros. And, um, you guys have seen my evolution since then. And I regret absolutely none of it. I have had an amazing time doing this show. I have met some amazing people. I have gotten to talk to legends of this industry. I've gotten to learn from them. And ultimately, the reason why I am ending Rollin Bones is because I want to focus on other things within role playing games. I'm not, leaving the internet. I'm not leaving X. I'm not leaving Substack. I'm going to be posting more on Substack. Actually, I'm really going to let this part of what I do go, because this is kind of what I'm the worst at. I've never really been good at hosting the kind of show that, people just can't get enough of. I have changed so much in my views on things. I have constantly, the shifting winds have caught me up, and I've gone in multiple different directions. And it's great for personal development. It's not great for hosting a show, because you get people who you get people who love a very specific thing, and this is what happened to me with the old school crowd. um you get people who like certain things, and then you stop talking about those certain things, you go in a different direction, and those people leave you behind. And sometimes you don't always pick up a new audience, or sometimes the new audience just isn't ready for what's going on. um this is something that my good friend Alchemic Raker said to me today in chat, that maybe what we're talking about is something that people aren't quite ready for. um maybe we're still the early adopters here. And that would be nice to know, but I'll only know that in hindsight. I'll only know in hindsight if I was an early adopter who was able to really make a difference, or if I was just some weirdo talking about something that nobody cares about. But for the time being, I am not going to be doing Rollin Bones anymore. To answer some questions here in chat, Patty's Parlor, would you still be down to come on other people's shows still? Yes, absolutely. I would love nothing more, honestly. Because that's one of the things that I love about doing this, is I get to talk to amazing people, many of whom are in chat right now. Patty is certainly one of them. Dundermoose is here in chat. He is one of my favorite people of all time. Raker, Harmony. I got to, not only did I get to talk to Alexander McCrease, I was one of the first people to actually bring him back on the scene. I was one of the first people that got to talk to Alex McCrease on their show. That is something that I'm very proud of. And, I can't take credit for his brilliance or his genius, but I can take credit for, talking to him and helping other people to see his, his brilliance and his genius. And so that is something that I will hang my hat on, that, he was willing to come on the show when he was really not doing anyone's show at all. And he was willing to hang out with me multiple times and really drop some amazing grains of knowledge on people here on Rollin Bones. And of course, I have to thank the Basic Expert, one of my best friends in the whole wide world. I have to thank Victor Gorchev, Crossface, Crafty Matt. And you know what? I'm going to say it. Thank you, Jeffro. Because, talking to Jeffro on this show and interacting with him, that was also a lot of fun. John Mollison here in chat, another fantastic guest that I've had on the show. Malachi, someone that I've really gotten to know well because I was doing this show and who's been on the show a couple times. B-Dubs. He's probably going to see this after the fact, but, I loved getting to talk to B-Dubs and get to know him. Ginger Frazier and young Steve Buscemi over at Black Lodge Games. Those guys are amazing, unbelievably talented, both as RPG creators and, doing this kind of stuff. They are a million times better at this than I am. And I hope that all of you will continue to support, all these creators that I have that I've named. Now, I don't just want to sit here and reminisce about, the good old days or, the people that I've had on the show. I really have had a lot of great people on the show. I want to demonstrate a little bit of my growth, though, because I have grown a lot. I am not the same person that I was even, 3 years ago in gaming terms. So I can't think of any better way to do that than to talk about someone who I had previously idolized, someone who, when he agreed to be on my show, I was completely over the moon, blown away. I thought, this is it. I am now officially in the big leagues. I am, I'm the man now. People are going to know who Ryan Gregory Howard is by thunder. And I had him on and we had a great conversation. And he's a great guy. And he's been very friendly to me. He's been very supportive of me. That being said, where he is in his gaming philosophy and where I am in mine could not be further apart now. I am, of course, talking about the one and only Professor Dungeon Master. Let me bring that up correctly here. The other week, I talked about this last week on the show, Professor Dungeon Master released a video that is so antithetical to where my head is at. I just have to. I just have to talk about it. I just have to. I have to talk about this one. Before I do that, though, we did have a question in chat, just to answer what I guess might be a burning question here, from Dundermoose. Games and posters in the background. So right over my shoulder here, that is the Batman Dark Knight Returns board game. And then right next to me, let me move my head so you guys can see it. That is a copy of Hate from Come On Games. And funny story about that copy of Hate. That was sent to me by Professor Dungeon Master because I won one of his Patreon contests where I wrote a joke that Deathbringer would say. I don't know if it ended up getting used. I know that I won the contest because, he sent the game to me and he listed me on Adhesive Tom's stream as the winner of the contest. The joke, though, was Deathbringer. He had just upgraded his model for Deathbringer. And so the joke was, Deathbringer here. You may have noticed recently that my glorious armor received an update. If only we could say the same about the host. I have no idea if he actually used it in any of his videos, but that was the joke that I wrote, and that's what won me that copy of hate behind me. Marvel Crisis Protocol, camera's mirrored. You'd think I had figured this out by now. Marvel Crisis Protocol right over my shoulder, and then a Mantic Games Dungeon in a Box is the other one. Also, I can fully turn around here so that you guys can see what I've got here. Zombicide Undead or Alive down there, and then the Batman the Animated Series game from IDW Games, and The Witcher the Old World and its expansions. That's what's on my shelf there behind me. Those are minis that I painted up at the top there, same as over there. The two posters are from I can't. Oh, I just remember the name of the comic. The two posters are they're from Thomas Valiant by R.J. Shaw, which was an independent comic that was put out by R.J. Shaw, who's the guy who runs the Fourth Age channel on YouTube. There was a time where I was a big proponent and supporter of Comicsgate and independent comic stuff, and so I had posters from RJ's campaign, and I just put them up because the art was nice. And then, as Rex is pointing out, the too many paintings, that's a diptych of Christ and the Theotokos. So yeah, that's what's behind me. For those of you who've been wondering all these years, it's changed a couple times, but that's what's been behind me for at least the past 2 years. So let's watch this Professor Dungeon Master video and talk a little bit about where the two of us have diverged over the years.
Imagine if your dungeon master didn't allow you to use the player's handbook. If you're a game master, imagine you said to your players, we're going to start a new campaign, but you're not allowed to use the player's handbook at all. Only I'm allowed to read it. What would they do? Would they go along with it? Would they rage quit your game? Could you actually have more fun with role-playing games if you didn't know the rules? Stick with me. That's the topic on today's Dungeon Craft.
We're going to talk about, and I'll let him give his argument and give the full, rundown of the premise here. I reject that premise outright. There was a time where I would have said, that sounds interesting. That sounds intriguing. Because when I began, I believed firmly that rules were secondary to, actually, I guess tertiary to fun and immersion in the game world. I no longer believe that because, and I can't believe it's, as blindingly obvious as this. Role-playing games are games. They will only ever be games. When you take away the game elements of role-playing games, you're taking away something fundamental to this whole thing. You are now you're not even doing improv, because as I've told people, improv has rules. Improv is a series of games where you are or are not allowed to do certain things, and the scenes play out based on those restrictions that you have put on the scene. So you're not even doing improv. You are sitting around telling a story together. You're telling a progressive story. That's all you're doing. So let's I'm going to skip through the intro here, and then we'll get back to what Dan is saying here.
Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor DM, and this channel is about all things tabletop role-playing games. And if that's what you're into, Deathbringer, tell them what they should do.
Like, subscribe, bell, comment, newsletter, Patreon.
So I'm reading this book, The Elusive Shift by John Peterson. It's about how role-playing games forged their identity. Back in the 1970s and 80s, when they first came out, people struggled to describe what they were and how to play them. The term role-playing game did not emerge.
Just a quick pause here. I have not read The Elusive Shift, so I can't tell you one way or the other if it's a good book. I haven't read it. I know people who have. I know people who highly recommend it. I haven't really heard anything bad about it, but just, so that's out there. I have not read The Elusive Shift.
For several years. If you don't know who John Peterson is, he is the historian who wrote Playing at the World, a comprehensive history of role-playing games, as well as The Game Master, which deals with the feud between creators Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. And all his books are great. And I'm thinking a lot about this passage I found on page 41. And now I'm about to do something that you really shouldn't do on YouTube if you want to retain viewers, which is read a page from a book. But what the hell, I'm going to do it anyway. So, setup. Dungeons & Dragons first appeared at conventions, gradually made its way to college campuses, and eventually made its way to Cambridge. There it was discovered.
I actually don't agree with that progression of events. Because I think we've seen from documentaries and from other other documents about, the history of role-playing games, it actually went from groups. Some of these groups were formed around colleges, but like groups at people's houses and tables. Local clubs to university campuses. Then, oddly enough, to like high school and middle school kids, I guess from having older brothers, then to conventions. So I don't think conventions to colleges to Cambridge is the right progression there, because you have it kind of really. Calvinoni points it out here. It's coming from wargame clubs. That's where, that's where kind of the seeds of this are sown, is within wargaming clubs. So, I don't necessarily agree with that progression of how this thing spread. I think it very much spread within wargaming clubs and, onto college campuses first, through these clubs that were largely made up of grad students and college kids. So, we'll, Malachi, the same author has called all of them white supremacist and misogynist. Well, I wish I could say I was surprised.
By student Sandy Eisen, who wrote, I found the first few games of Dungeons & Dragons intensely enjoyable and exciting. I really lived the part, and my willing suspension of disbelief, I found myself there, in the dungeon. My actions, and of course my thoughts about these actions, were dictated by real-life considerations, and no thought to wargame mechanics entered my head to distract me from the events going on. But for Eisen, eventually learning the game system became a source of acute disappointment. Inevitably, when you are aware of the rules, you play out each situation with an eye toward obtaining the best odds or chances for survival, etc., considering the rules rather than the situation you are in. To avoid this, I have decided that when I design and run my own dungeon, I will not permit my players to discover the rules. Of course, this will put them at a great disadvantage, and I feel I may have to put over quite a bit of information in the form of legend, folklore, and tales so that they will have some idea of what they are up against and what to try, but all without disclosing the game mechanics.
Okay. So, Sandy Eisen, legend of the RPG world, Sandy Eisen, who I had never heard of until I watched this video. He says the first few times he played, he was immersed. he was really playing. He was really, trying to play based on, considerations as if he were in the dungeon himself. But when he learned the rules, he found out that he was playing a game. And because he was playing a game, he could no longer separate the mechanics of the game world from the world that he was embodying. All right. So I'm going to use an example that our good friends at Black Lodge Games would use, and this is actually something that Ginger Fraser and I have disagreed on. We when I first watched this video, I had a very visceral reaction to it, and Ginger Fraser actually did not agree with me in my assessment. So this might be interesting, especially once he gets around to watching this. As an actor, your kind of highest goal is to live truthfully within the given imaginary circumstances. So you have put yourself in this reality of the scene, the reality of the script that you are writing, or not that you're writing, that you're reading from, that you're reciting, that you're acting out. However, in that living truthfully, you are still, as a professional, expected to say the words that you were given. Now, we all know stories about, someone like Robin Williams improvising a line and people thinking, oh, that's brilliant. That's hilarious. That we should put that in. 9 tenths out of 10, because you're working with people who have egos in the acting world. As someone who has acted, I can tell you this from experience. If you don't do what you're instructed to do, someone behind the camera near the director is going to throw their book down and start cussing a blue streak at you because you moron, why can't you just do what's in the script? What do you want to write this movie? Is it your name that's going to be on the marquee here? On and on and on. You have to work within the constraints that you are given, but you have to live truthfully. So how do you do that? The words that you were given, the restrictions that are given to you in the scene, those are your rules. You have to communicate the authentic feeling of that script, of that character in that moment, using the words that you are given. I had an acting teacher one time say, imagine that these words that you were saying are another language and the intent that you have in your head. So if you're in a scene where you are professing your love to another actress, if you are, you're professing your love, your character's professing love to another character, you are professing love to this other person. Imagine that the words that you have here in the scene where you are pouring your heart out are French for "I love you so much and I want to be with you forever," or however the sentiment comes out in your head, however you interpret that. These words are how you are saying that. This is the way that you have to interface between these two realities of you, overpaid moron who are privileged to be making money pretending to be someone else, and this scene that you are, as a professional, as a master of your craft, supposed to be living truthfully within. The material in between here is your that is your interface. That is how you interact with the world of fiction, is through this interface that is the script. That's what the rules are in a role-playing game. The rules are your interface to this world. They are the controls that you pull and tinker with to create certain outcomes. This is something I did not understand. This is something that I struggled with even as someone with an acting background who had learned all of this stuff before, but also contemporaneously with, getting into role-playing games. The rules are how you interact with this world. So to be immersed in the story, in the world, you have to be immersed within the rules. You have to be fluent with the rules. Because what happens when you aren't fluent with the rules or fluent with the story, or not fluent with the script? You will want to do things, you will want to convey things, but you will struggle to find ways to interact with this other world. And so you will constantly do things that will break your immersion. You'll have to call line. And anyone who's ever done theater or film acting, you call line and it's all over. Everyone's out at that point. and you're not supposed to do it during a live performance. If you do, you're a moron. You shouldn't be there, or you're in high school. Yeah, you're calling line. And it's the same thing as this idea that the late Shawner put forward, this Mother May I gaming. When you don't know the rules, that's what you default to. That's what most people default to. The presupposition that Professor Dungeon Master is putting forward here is that without knowing the rules, you will default to acting naturally, as if you were in that situation. In my experience, and I think in the overwhelming majority of people's experience, that is not at all what happens. It is always, can I? Can I do this? Can I do that? Or even worse, how do I? How do I jump the chasm? How do I swing on the chandelier? Can I seduce the dragon? And then, you're welcome to try. Is the Dundermoose is supplying the kind of classic interface here, or the classic interchange between players and game masters. And unfortunately, when you tell someone you're lucky to try, or you're welcome to try, the next question is usually, okay, how do I do that? And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that. We do have a $5 super chat here from Tag 1080. Can't stay just swinging in to support the show. Do some push-ups, touch grass. I work out 3 times a week. I appreciate the sentiment. I am doing my best to, be a man of the real world and uphold my responsibilities and all that stuff. I appreciate that though, Tag. And I've appreciated you supporting the show as much as you have recently. So thank you. So let's keep watching and see kind of where Professor Dungeon Master takes this.
Eisen wasn't the only one who felt this way. I've heard of game masters back in the 70s who wouldn't allow their players to have their character sheets. They could roll up the character, but as soon as the game began, the game master took the character sheets and kept track of the players' hit points and equipment themselves.
That is not the same thing as disallowing players from reading the rules. What you are doing there, one, the players have seen their character record. They rolled it up. So, in theory, they should be kind of aware of what they have. Maybe they wrote it down somewhere. But in that scenario, you're still able to read the rule book. You're still able to figure out, the mechanics of how you do things. Even for game masters who rolled all dice for their players, the player should still know kind of how all that stuff works. And, should still understand that, okay, yes, my character can do this. My character's a fighter. He can do this particularly well. Or my character's a thief. He's got, this much of a % chance to succeed at, picking this lock. Having the character sheet where only the DM can see it is different from completely walling off access to the rules. That's just basically saying, I will keep the record of this character for you. I will keep track of your hit points. I will keep track of your gold, your equipment, all that stuff. It is a degree more control than I think a game master should have over a table. I don't like that particular way of playing. I think it's kind of stupid because it puts way too much puts way too much power in the hands of the dungeon master and doesn't give enough agency to the players. But that's different from saying you cannot read the rules. So, Dundermoose here. Do I have a sword? Let me check. Also, you may not have been aware, but you were in a combat wheelchair. Yeah. Yep. Hey, it turns out you can't jump this chasm because your character's crippled. Yeah. So let's keep watching and see what else he has to say.
Other game masters kept the character's armor class and even hit points secret, and they would describe the results of the combat. Like, you were just slightly grazed, or you're really bleeding out, you're barely able to stand up. And the players would have to make their decisions based on that. And it sounds crazy. I remember reading about it back in the 80s, and I thought, wow, that's just nuts. But now I understand why a game master would do that. It's because once you know the mechanics, it hurts the immersion. Dungeons & Dragons is a game.
No, that is not why it was done. Game masters would keep players' character sheets to keep them from cheating. That is the... that's basically the long and short of why they would keep character sheets. It's not a matter of immersion. It's a power trip for the GM. It's bad advice that got filtered down somewhere along the line. And there's lots of kind of weirdness that you see in early D&D and how certain early game masters would run the game. There were game masters who would hide themselves behind like a full body screen to basically embody I am the voice of God. I am not actually a person here. But keeping a player's character record from them was essentially only to prevent cheating, not to bolster any sense of immersion. I think the idea of immersion is really more of a modern thing, really kind of since the Forge and GNS days has this idea of immersion been present in role-playing game, except apparently for this one Sandy fellow who for some reason I guess didn't understand that he was playing a game, but we'll continue.
Game about magic, but a lot of the magic of the game is lost once you learn the rules. At least that's been my experience. This is the first version of Dungeons & Dragons I played with back in 1980, 1981. And I became the game master because my friends were just too lazy to read the rules. So I never had that initial Dungeons & Dragons experience where I really didn't know what was going on. But my friends loved the game, and that was a blessing and a curse, because on one hand, I had players to play with, but on the other hand, they all bought the game too, and then they read it. I got the player's handbook, they got the player's handbook. I got the DM's guide and monster manual, they got the DM's guide and monster manual, even though they weren't the game master. But after a while, they knew the strengths and the weaknesses of the monsters. I would throw a troll at them, and they would say, we got to use a torch, we got to burn it. Trolls regenerate unless you use fire on them. And that's when the game, to me, lost a lot of its magic and devolved into a lot of numbers crunching and arguing about rules. Most of the people I played games with in intermediate school stopped playing Dungeons & Dragons, but my enthusiasm continued. And
all right, we're gonna pause here. There's a lot to talk about here. Firstly, all of his friends were too lazy to read the rules, and yet at a certain point, he had a problem with his players reading the rules. It's contradictory, but we'll set that aside because that's the least important aspect of this. Dan uses the biggest example that people throw around of the troll. The troll is only scary when you don't know that it's weak to fire. And I'm going to give a heaping pile of credit to Crafty Matt here because he really articulated this better than almost anyone that I've seen. Your characters live in this world. They are members of societies that have to deal with uh, orc raids, trolls in the woods, um, witches, dragons, wizards, any old hag that stumbles through your village could potentially be a witch in disguise who's going to poison your well if you upset her. These are the kinds of things that happen in uh, fantasy worlds. At the very least, a troll in a fantasy world should be kind of like Bigfoot or the chupacabra. There's stories told about them. People have heard things about them. There's all these rumors, and some of it could be false, some of it could be true, some of it could be exaggerations or misinterpretations of the truth. But the idea that your players encountering a troll for the first time would have absolutely no idea, one, what it was, or two, that fire hurts it. That's a bridge too far. That is silly. It doesn't make any sense. Also, knowing that something has a weakness is not the same as exploiting that weakness. It's not the same as actually going through the actions of exploiting that weakness. So you coming off of your couch, having read the Iliad and the Odyssey, are going to fight Achilles. You're going to fight the mythical Achilles tomorrow. You, who watch RPG YouTube shows, I don't want to assert anything negative about my audience. I love you guys. I'm glad that you've supported me for all of this. I don't think the majority of you are in fighting trim at this very moment. At least not to do melee combat with a warrior of the prowess of the mythical Achilles. But you are going to fight him tomorrow. You know that on his heel, he is vulnerable, and that is his only vulnerability. You still have to find some way to get to his heel. And Achilles is a master swordsman. He has been fighting his entire life. How are you going to get to that heel? How are you going to stack the odds in your favor so that you can exploit that weakness? Knowing everything there is to know about this guy. You know his mother's name. You know how you know how he got invincible. You know how he ultimately dies at the end of the Trojan War. But you still have to fight him. You still have to figure out how you're going to get that arrow into his ankle, or the spear into his ankle, or however it is you're going to do it. You're going to make him step on a Lego. I don't know, but you got to figure that out. So just knowing about Achilles' heel does not mean that you can automatically defeat him. You still have to actually do it. Likewise, you still have to actually, when you encounter a troll, find some way to get the fire onto the troll. So if you are a magic user, you've got to be able to, cast that fireball at the right moment, assuming you can cast fireball. if you don't have a magic user, your magic user doesn't know Fireball, you've got to find some way to, shoot him with a flaming arrow, hit him with a torch, trick him into a pit trap where you've, sprayed oil. There are still mechanical ways in which you have to get the fire onto the troll before you can defeat him. You don't just walk up to the troll at the beginning of your turn and say, "You can't handle fire." And, the troll just goes, "Oh, shit, you're right." And, commits seppuku right there in front of you. Like, you still have to do it. So this idea that, knowing the weakness or knowing the ways in which these things work somehow, diminishes your ability to fight them. No. You just have a tactic. Now you have to actually implement that tactic. So I completely reject this outright. Knowing a monster's weakness is not the end of the entire encounter. You have to figure out how to get it there. And also, and this is something else that Crafty Matt pointed out, but Dice Tales here in chat points it out, the troll also knows that he's weak to fire. They're afraid of fire because they know that it hurts them. They have the genetic memory of the first troll that accidentally touched fire, or their mother told them about stay away from man's red flower, to use the Rudyard Kipling reference there. The troll knows as soon as a torch is waved at him, oh, I need to stay away from there. I'm gonna throw rocks at them. Or the man in the pointy hat throws fire. I was told by my cousin Grum that Pointy Hat Man throws fire. So I'm going to go kill Pointy Hat Man first. He looks frail and fragile, so I'm going to get up on him and I'm going to rip him in half so that Pointy Hat Man can't throw fire at me. So, there's all kinds of ways to make this still work. You haven't given up the entire game just because you know the weakness. So let's keep watching and see what else Dan has to say here.
And I cultivated a group of like-minded individuals, and we eventually tried out other role-playing games. I never had that first-player experience until I played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay in the late 80s. My friend Raphael bought a copy, and he wanted to game master it for us. And the game was super expensive, so we could only afford one copy. And I understood the basic mechanics well enough. It was like Call of Cthulhu, percentile, roll under to hit. But I wasn't sure how the critical hit charts worked. And they scared me because they were really gory. You didn't just drop to 0 hit points. Your pelvis got smashed, or a carotid artery was severed and you got hit with an arterial spray. I remember the first session we were exploring a sewer and we encountered a demon. And I remember being so terrified that I ran away. Not because I failed some sort of fear check, because I was actually afraid my character was going to die. That excitement, that thrilling feeling of not knowing where the parameters are is one of the reasons I actually enjoy playing role-playing games. I always say, if you want to introduce me to a new game, just have me sit down at your table and I'll play the game. Don't explain to me the character sheet. We'll work it out as we play. When I run Dungeons...
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about this, because there is some good here. There's actually something laudable here to discuss. Yeah, like that's a cool experience. He talks about, mechanical unfamiliarity being the thing that kind of spurred on this fear when he encountered a demon. But he also talked about knowing about the critical hit table, so he did have at least a passing familiarity with the rules. But yeah, as Dunder says here, knowing the rules can make it more scary. That the opposite effect can happen here, because what Dunder is talking about here with if the players know about level drain, I guarantee they will be terrified of your white. when you go into D&D, completely unaware, or you're only aware of modern D&D where level drain is not a thing. You don't know that a white drains levels, so you don't know what to be afraid of when the white shows up. But when you do know the rules, when you do know those mechanics, you know just exactly what that thing is going to do. You worked goddamn hard to get to uh yeah, level 3. Let's keep it low level here. You worked super hard to get a level 3. You spent all the money on training and all that stuff, and this thing, if it touches you, is going to take all that hard work away from you in an instant. How are you going to deal with that? And so that's where some of that fear comes in. You know that thing is scary. You know what it's going to do to you. And so that it's scary there. Yes, encountering a demon in a sewer when you don't know what it is, the description of the game master can, you can infer from that, oh, this is a demon. But if you also have read the demon stat block and you're, say, a third level character in Warhammer Fantasy, I don't know much about Warhammer Fantasy, but you're a low level Warhammer Fantasy character and you encounter a demon, I'm pretty sure that's scary as hell. Leaving aside the fact that Warhammer demons come from the warp and are just inherently more terrifying because of all the lore behind them, and the way that Warhammer describes their demons and all that. Just all that aside, you can learn that from the rules, or you can just have seen their stat block and know I don't have a prayer against this thing. and still have that sense of fear there. But the one thing that I do want to point out that Dan talks about here that is worthwhile, the value of sitting down to play. Crafty Matt in chat here with the ever famous RTFM. Yes, read the fucking manual. That is absolutely correct. However, at a certain point, you do also have to play the game. And so one approach that is a valid approach can be, I will play the game now. We'll see how, things go. And then later, after action, I will read the rules, find out what I did right, what I did wrong, and, make my game plan for next session. At a certain point, though, all the theory in the world does have to go up against some praxis. Dan is the kind of guy who, by his own admission, does not take a lot of time to read rule books, and so he wants to learn by doing. A lot of people prefer to learn by doing. And that's a good thing to do, just as long as you supplement that doing with a little understanding of the rules, because the rules are what's going to drive this home. So let's keep watching and see what else he has to say.
Dungeons & Dragons for the first time for students, I always start them with fully equipped characters at the entrance to Cave A of the Caves of Chaos. It's the Kobold lair. Then I say, you're at the entrance to the cave. Who's going to be the first to step in? And I describe the kobolds as pit bulls walking on their hind legs, wielding spears. And I have had groups of players who just ran in fear, or the kobolds growled at them and they backed out of the room. They were terrified. They don't know that you could just punt a kobold and kill them. That's one of the reasons I love running games for young people, because they don't know the rules. So all the sessions are super exciting. When players use language like they're going to build a character or optimize a character, that's meta.
I'm going to pause here, and I'm actually going to back up because this is a separate point that we'll talk about. So yeah, and in this example, we're not dealing with something that's stronger than the players. It's something like a kobold that can be described as more fearful than maybe they actually are. A lot of people think of kobolds as cannon fodder, and a lot of that comes down to improperly using kobolds. You have to understand what you have with kobolds. They attack in groups. Yes, individually a kobold is pretty weak, but that's why they hunt in packs. And I think that's also why should set up traps more so than goblins. Goblins are like, we're going to mob you and stab the crap out of you. Kobolds are like, we're going to set a Viet Cong trap for you, and then while you're bleeding out over a pit of punji stakes, we're gonna like stab you in the head with a spear. And that's how I view kobolds versus goblins and all that. But like, you have to understand, you have to read a book like The Monsters Know What They're Doing, or read stat blocks and understand how these things work. This is all in the Game Master. To work around players' preconceived notions of the stat block of a single kobold. And, you know, again, like, knowing that a kobold individually is weak is not the end of the session. It's not the end of the encounter. And even like, you know, even if the player themselves have read The Monsters Know What They're Doing and know that, you know, kobolds can attack in groups and, you know, do kind of tricky things, again, you still have the dice, and you still have to find some way to account for that. You have to figure out what you're going to do. It's not just, you know, I know that you have a plan. You have to be able to counter that plan. So, you know, let's hear this next point, because I think this is important as well.
Are super exciting. When players use language like they're going to build a character or optimize a character, that's metagaming. That's trying to exploit the rules to get a character that is resilient and as powerful as possible. And if you enjoy playing role-playing games like that, that's fine. It's approaching D&D as if it were a strategy game. Lots of people play that way and enjoy it, but I generally don't think that tactics and combat is where D&D is the best. If I wanted to play a
okay. In general, I agree with him. I prefer randomly rolled characters. I call it character discovery rather than character creation. And that's what I'm going to call it in Project Skeleton, is you're going to go through the process of character discovery rather than creation. Because I prefer, instead of I am going to build a character that goes into this world, it is I am going to figure out who this character is that already lives in this world. So instead of I am going to you know, place all of these stats individually, it's I'm going to roll and you know, have a little bit of leeway within rolling, but we're going to kind of figure out who this guy is. Not we're going to build this guy from the ground up. And part of the reason why I want to do that is so that, like, one, yes, you're fighting this like character optimization type, you know, meta that pops up, but also you cut down on characters that just don't fit in your game. You're not going to have someone who's like, okay, I have brought Vash the Stampede. Well, okay, that's a bad example, because I think, you know, playing a medieval Vash the Stampede would actually be pretty cool. But you know, I'm gonna bring Luffy from One Piece into your landlocked medieval role-playing game. You know, there aren't pirates here. But, you know, I want to play Monkey D. Luffy because, you know, I love I love One Piece, and that's how I want to interact with your game world, and that's the only thing that I care about. So yeah, just, you know, cut down on that as much as possible. Make it more about discovering who is this person, who is this perspective that you're going to be borrowing for a little bit. Because when you think about playing a character as borrowing the perspective of someone who embodies this world, you do away with some of the, like, hey, I own this character, so I really don't want anything bad to happen to them. It's more like I am temporarily in the driver's seat of this person, and I am going to take them as far as I possibly can. That's the kind of thing that I want to foster in my game. That being said, when you have games where you are building characters, your Pathfinders, your 3.5, fourth edition, fifth edition D&D, even Savage Worlds. Okay, that's fine. That's the meta, and yes, there's going to be a meta. There are going to be options that synergize with each other. There's going to be optimal and suboptimal builds. That is fine. Maybe it's not how you prefer to play, but that's not a problem with the game. It's just a different game at that point. It's just now you have to account for the fact that there are these like optimized characters that are out there. And some games are not very good at doing that. But calling that a problem is the wrong way to think about it. And again, I'm leaning very heavily on Crafty Matt here, because what we're dealing with is the scrub mindset. This idea of, no, it's bad for you to know this better than everyone else. It's bad for you to understand these rules. It's bad for you to be fluent and literate in the language of this game world. No, it's not, because you're playing a game. And why should we punish people for wanting to play the game the best way that they know how? Why should we punish people for trying to be as powerful as they possibly can? Dice Tales, I don't agree with that at all. I think it is role playing. If you have a character that is optimized, you are creating for yourself a role. You just have it. That's your role, and you want to be the best that you possibly can at your role. So you want to know, like, okay, what are some of the best options for me? How do I pursue this? How do I make this fighter the best fighter to have ever picked up a sword? Because you want to be the best at your role. You are playing your role. So, like, at the end of the day, role playing is not just speaking in character, speaking in a character voice, thinking like your well, it is thinking like your character. Optimizing your build is thinking like your character, because if your fighter is not thinking, how am I going to be the very best warrior that I possibly can be? Then they're not very good at their job. So optimizing a character is not the antithesis of role playing. This is something else. This is another fallacy that I had built up in my head when I first started this. Dunder talking about the models here is hilarious. You can have the Lantern Dude 6-pack for 88 shrewd bucks. But how many Stanley nickels would I have to pay to have the Lantern Dude 6-pack? So, yeah. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Like, yes, having an optimized character, if you build a specific optimum character because you want to be the best, where is your development? Your development isn't becoming the best. I did not try to be the best I can by optimizing stats about myself. Like, I fundamentally disagree with this. So, to pay the bills, am a salesman. To feed my family, to enable me to have this room where I record the show, I have to be good at being a salesman, and to make this room comfortable, and buy good food, and I have to become a better salesman to do that, to get people to watch the show. And one of the reasons why I'm ending the show, I have not optimized myself as a show host. I need to optimize myself as an RPG writer to get people to want to read my books. So being the best is a roleplay goal. It just is. And the mechanics, again, are how you interface with the world. You have to become better to be the best at your role, to play the role. You have to, yeah. Like your life experience in becoming better is the gameplay. That's not picking a stat. That's a process that should be role play. Okay, yeah, like we can agree on that. I think training time is something that should be in games. I think you should have to spend in-game resources to get better. And that's what experience is. It's an in-game resource that you're using. That's why gold for XP is a very important mechanic. And that's why, again, in Project Skeleton, there's not going to be XP. It's all going to be gold-based because it has, you are representing your investing resources into becoming better at this. You have to pay a mentor. You have to pay for your training expenses. You have to pay for your new equipment, all that stuff. And so, yeah, I think it should be baked into the mechanics that, playing and becoming better is part of the game. But, and again, character creation is just where you are starting. And I don't think you and I disagree on this. I prefer rolling your stats randomly. I prefer the discovery method. But if you are building a character, all you're doing is building a starting point, and then you have to go from there. And so there's no reason why, if the rules of the game allow you to start out advantaged, there is no reason, moral or otherwise, to play a suboptimal character. The rules allow you to make a better character. So make a better character. Nothing wrong with that. Tag 1080 just noticed this is your last show. Everyone else needs to do more to support shows like this. So long. Thanks for all the fish. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. And I'm glad that you've supported me in this way. And I never expected people to donate. I always appreciated it when they did. And I appreciate that you've done so not just once, but twice tonight, Tag. Thank you for that. But yeah, that is one way to keep something like this going. And it's, I'm not saying, donate to me and I'll keep doing this show. I'm going to have to put the show on ice for a little bit. That's just the reality of kind of where I'm at right now. But yes, supporting shows like this is a way to keep us, it's a way to keep the lights on. That being said, it's we're hanging it up after tonight. So let's finish out this video and see what else Dan has to say here.
Tactical combat game, I would play Kingdom Death, which I think has more fun mechanics. The reason I play Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games is not because of mechanics, it's because of the immersion. I want to feel like I'm really there. When I'm playing a game, one of the things that really takes me out of the moment is when the game master describes this great lead-up and this terrifying monster and then says, okay, everyone roll for initiative. And we sit for 5 minutes trying to figure out just who goes first. And this has really informed how I introduce new players to the game. I've heard of groups that will invite you to watch for a couple of sessions before they'll actually let you play. But I don't do that. I always say, yeah, you never played? That's fine. Come in, sit at the table. And I'll...
Okay. If the mechanics are keeping you from investing in the world, if the mechanics are a hindrance to actually playing the game, then what you're playing is a bad game. You're playing a game with bad mechanics. Purple Druid presents A suboptimal character is a character that is not as good at doing what they're supposed to be doing as they should be. So, to use the example, you're playing a human fighter in, let's say, like 3.5 edition, but you've spent all of your skills in cooking and uh, blacksmithing and stuff like that. So you're not very good at swinging a sword and fighting, but you're really good at a bunch of random stupid stuff. Or like Patty points out, a real life person is a suboptimal character. Like, yeah, very few of us are truly gifted in major ways. And so that's one way to think about it. But that when I talk about optimal and suboptimal builds, what I'm referring to is you're playing a character who is not very good at the class that they have chosen to take. You're not a very good wizard, even though you're a wizard. You're not a very good thief. That kind of stuff. But anyway, this idea of mechanics getting in the way of immersion. If the mechanics are not in service to creating this world of the game, if the mechanics are keeping you from actually doing stuff and forwarding the game, then you have bad mechanics. And yes, I would argue that he's doing initiative wrong in this case, because the best way to do initiative, if you're not going to do like side-based initiative, which Crossface is a big advocate for like side-based initiative. But if you're doing individual rolled initiative, the best way to do it is just start at the biggest number. Just, let's say it's a D10 for initiative. My 10s. Who are my 10s? Nobody. My 9s. Who are my 9s? Nobody. My 8s. Who are my 8s? You, and you. Okay, who's got the highest dex? All right, go. Just don't wait for everyone to list their numbers or anything like that. Just everyone roll, keep the dice in front of you, and then we'll go down the line from highest number to lowest number, or whatever order your game proceeds in. One of my favorite initiative systems, and one that I'm hoping to replicate in Project Skeleton, is Victory Games' James Bond system, where everyone rolls, and the person who rolls the highest declares their action first. Or sorry, the person who rolls the highest declares their action last, but they go first. So in that case, I would have everyone roll. I would start at the lowest number and have that person declare their action and then build up to the highest number. You declare your action, and then it plays out in reverse order. So there are ways to get around just like waiting for everyone to, say what, shout your number. It's like playing a game of Pit, where everyone's like 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. If you've never played a game of Pit, it's chaos, pure chaos. But digression. Yeah, like that. Don't do initiative in ways that inhibit your progress like that. Just do do initiative based on the rules, and then the rules should be written to the rules should be written to help with that. And honestly, Purple Druid Presents, I agree. A crappy wizard is kind of interesting. Because you and this is something I want to create with Project Skeleton. Can you train to get past your weaknesses? Can you become, you're not a naturally gifted student, but can you study to become a better wizard? Can you overcome your dyslexia to be able to actually cast spells? Can you overcome your physical sickliness to actually be a decent fighter? Or, can you find some kind of martial use for your sickliness? You're physically weak, but your mind is very strong. You don't want to be a wizard. You want to be a fighter. Okay, your mind is very strong. You're physically weak. You're going to be the world's greatest general. You're going to be a tactical genius. You're going to be Napoleon, even though Napoleon was not like physically frail. So yeah. I like wizards with a high strength, 17th strength wizard named Curlin, Macho Mandolf comes to mind. There's examples of suboptimal or inappropriate, I almost said inappropriate characters. God. Anyway, let's hear a little bit more about this.
I'll give the player a simplified character sheet. Just their ability scores, no 3 to 18, just the bonus, their hit points, and their armor class. And I'll say, if you want to kill something, tell me, I'll tell you what you need to roll. I recently went to see the 20-Sided Tavern. It's a...
All right, so we're gonna end it here. We're gonna end the watching of the video. But just that point there. Tell me when you want to kill something and I'll tell you how to kill it. Okay, that's fine once. That's fine for like 1, maybe 2 sessions. After that, you need to start figuring it out. If you're always asking me what to roll, I'm going to get annoyed as a game master. You should know. You should know how to play your characters. You should know how the mechanics work. And that's what all of this comes down to. The mechanics. You need to know them. You just need to know them. Purple Druid, again, like you're correct. How many fictional characters are there that are not good at what they're supposed to be doing? Elric is not, a physically imposing fighter, but he, is a fighter. He has a magic sword. So yeah, like I'm right there with you. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not opting for a build-based game. I'm opting for a game where you're rolling your stats. At least somewhat. So yeah, like we're in agreement there. But something that Dan does go on to say at the end of this video, and this is kind of where I want to end the conversation, because I've talked a lot about this. He says that he prefers mechanically light games. And this is the heart of where I have changed on role-playing games. There is no reason to value a game with fewer mechanics over a game with more mechanics or a game with more complex rules. You value games based on how well the rules replicate what you're trying to accomplish in the game. How well are you able to replicate medieval combat? Or at least like stories about medieval combat. What level of abstraction are you aiming for? If you're trying to create a game like Arma, a video game like Arma, but the mechanics that you're playing with play more like Call of Duty, you have not created a very good military sim. If you are creating a first-person shooter that's supposed to be, fast-paced like Call of Duty, and your mechanics are very crunchy like an Arma, again, you have a misalignment of expectations there. So it's all about how well do your mechanics suit the purpose of your game. And sometimes that means more crunch. Sometimes that means, less crunch. Yep. Like Dunder is saying here, rules tight over rules light. You don't want to overcomplicate things. I understand that. I understand not everyone wants to play GURPS, or not everyone wants to play Palladium Fantasy. but some people really like both of those games, and they play them really well. My good friend John TGG talks about watching people who are really good at GURPS play GURPS, and they play it like the rules aren't complicated because they know the rules. They know them inside and out. So they're doing turns in GURPS like it's nothing. They're playing it like, these room temperature IQ people play Morkborg, where just every turn takes like 5 seconds. So it's a matter of, can you get people to understand the game? And once people do understand the game, do the rules work harmoniously together so that you can eventually enter this flow state? That's what makes a good game. Not, how few rules how few rules can I fit into this rule book? I made a pamphlet game. Oh yeah, I made a one-page game. Oh yeah, I made an index card game. I made a game that fits on a post-it note. One of these days, someone's going to be like, I made a game that fits on a grain of rice, like you would get at the mall. There is no there you are not inherently more virtuous for having less rules, because then the game that has no rules is the best game. Like, this game has no rules. This is Calvin Ball. Calvin Ball is the best RPG. It is the rules lightest RPG. So, this idea of, rules light versus rules heavy, these are two dichotomous things. It's just complete nonsense garbage. And I wish I could go back in time and get on the Forge when these conversations were happening and just tell all these people that they're stupid. Because they are. The last 30 years of RPG conversation has just been built on this stupid notion that having less rules is somehow better, or that having more rules makes your game inherently too complicated. And I'm just done with that. I am completely done with that side of role play. I never want to have another argument about rules light versus crunch. It's dumb. It's stupid. And I hope that in my writing and in my tinkering with these ideas that I've learned over the past 5 years, that I will be able to help bring about the death of this kind of nonsense paradigm of the amount of rules determines how good your game is. And by the way, the reverse is true as well. People are like, no, this game is more complicated, therefore it's better. That's also stupid. But it's something that I think all of us have accepted at some point. And to the credit of a lot of you guys who are watching right now, most of you are right here with me, and you think, okay, this is a stupid dichotomy. So yeah, let's put that to bed. Let's bury that in the coffin. All the nonsense ideas that came out of the Forge, we are now standing in the ashes of the RPG golden age that was built upon those ideas. And it wasn't even a golden age. It was like an RPG copper age, basically, in the grand scheme of things. It was built upon the foundation of these, Forge ideas, and look at it now. It didn't even last 10 years. So yeah, maybe that's a downer note to end my last show ever on. But yeah, no, that is the like one big takeaway from my entire time on YouTube doing the show. An RPG's quality is not determined by how many or how few rules it has. It's determined by how well those rules create what you were intending to create at the table. How well do they simulate? And that's another thing that the Trove got wrong. All games are simulations. So it's all simulationism. How well do your rules simulate what they set out to simulate? If you were saying this is a medieval tactical fantasy game, how well do you create a medieval tactical fantasy game? Yeah. So, with that said, thank you all for tuning in tonight. This has been a great stream. This has been a great opportunity and adventure with all of you guys. I'm going to leave the link here in chat. And by the way, the channel is going to stay up. I'm not going to delete any videos or any streams or anything like that. Like I said, I am unashamed entirely of everything that I've done here. I'm very proud of what I was able to accomplish. There are only very few places in my YouTube career where I was, not happy with what I was doing. It's just time for me to do something else now. It's time for me to write. It's time for me to take other things more seriously and kind of let this go for now. Maybe someday I'll be back. Maybe someday Rollin Bones will exist in stream format again. Who knows? I'm not going to rule it out. I'm not going to say, I'm never doing this YouTube thing again. And I'm not withdrawing from the internet. I'm not, I'm still going to be posting regularly on rollinbones.substack.com. I'm still going to be active in the Basic Experts Gilded server. I'm still going to be on X. And any show that will have me on, schedule permitting, I will happily appear on Natural Ones or some rando RPG chat or Diversity and Dragons. I love Double D. He's been very kind to me as well. Black Lodge Games, if they'll have me on again. Anyone who I have been on their show before, Harmony and Dunder had their show, and Dunder has very kindly invited me on his solo stream as well. Anyone who's willing to have me on the show, I'm still down to do it. I'm not throwing away my equipment anytime soon. It's just for right now. I have to focus on other things. So thank you all again for watching this. I'm happy that anyone wanted to hear what I had to say about any of this. Even though I have been, just being honest with you guys, ungrateful to those of you who have been with me for a long time, or those of you who have watched. I've been ungrateful that I have anyone's ear. I've always been concerned about the size of my audience. I'm just glad that someone out there cared to listen. And the fact that, as many of you listened as you did, it means a lot to me. So that is it for Rollin Bones for the time being. That's all she wrote. Stay tuned. Follow me on Substack. Follow me on Twitter. Twitter is @Howard_Ryan Gregg. I'll go ahead and put that up for you guys. You can also follow me on Instagram if you want to. But at Howard_Ryan Gregg on X, and then Substack, rollinbones.substack.com. That's going to be where you should look for what I'm doing next. Dunder, leave my grandmother alone. If you guys can find that thread on Twitter, I recommend it. But yeah, that's it for me tonight. So thank you all once again for supporting me for this long. And until we meet again, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard. I love you all. Happy gaming.